Hello everybody. We're in lockdown and to be honest there's not a busting lot else to do, so I thought I'd make a video and treat you all to a story. So if you're sitting comfortably, then I'll begin. This is entitled Abbey National Cricket Club Tour 1994, and it's a report by that legendary reporter L.B.Doubleyew. On an overcast morning, on Thursday 28th of July, the cream of Abbey's cricketers set off on tour. In the meantime, Pete Seaman and his cronies headed off for North Devon with cries of "Westward, Seaman." This was because Pete and not Cam was driving the minibus. After a tour of Milton Keynes and surrounding districts, we were on our way. Despite the pouring rain, spirits were high. What a shame that the batting averages weren't. Time soon passed as we winged our way to the west. There was even a bet on the total aggregate that would be amassed by this fine collection of cricketers. A wide variety of scores were predicted, none for Elvis though. Even 600 plus was predicted by a few. These people probably backed England to win the last World Cup. Following a few revised ETAs by our meandering driver, Rumble-Strip Seaman, we arrived at the Puffin at 1 o'clock. All were very impressed by our accommodation, except perhaps the chair, who probably wished that the toilet was just outside the room. Swindon, I think. After quaffing a few ales and having a hearty lunch, it was time to depart for North Molton. We thought for a moment that the fashion victim had decided to tour after all. However, upon closer investigation, it turned out to be a scarecrow. We'd soon adjusted to the pace of life in the area and were late. Still, when you can always put the clock back, it's no problem, and all games will start dead on 2:30. The game was skippered by that ever-aggressive batsman Phil North, who can play off both feet, being equally at home with both the forward and backward defensive. The Abbey lost the toss, coin variety Elvis, and were put in. Phil Roberts, arthritic hip, and Pete Drugo, arthritic brain, opened the innings. Briefly, the chair got 70 plus, boom boom 37, and we bowled them out for less. A comfortable win, just like shelling carrots apparently. The evening saw many ales downed, some pathetic attempts at skittles, and much fraternising with the one opposition player in the bar. Then it was off to an Indian. We didn't know which one to choose, and could have ended up at a really unsociable one. And of course that's what happened. They were the most miserable bunch of bar stewards and waiters. Scoggy made them pay by leaving his guts and jacket there. He returned to collect his jacket, not his guts, 2 days later to find them just as unsociable. Following the meal, it was back to the Puffin for more beers, and so to bed. Friday morning came and Elvis didn't. No change there then. Most made brekkie, and the vegans were there enviously watching teammates pile on the cholesterol. Once Simo was awake, a decision was made. It was off to take in the vast range of leisure facilities that Westward Ho could offer. What a shame most of them were closed. Still, you could always have a Hocking's ice cream. Following this intense excitement, it was off to some sandy beach nearby, whose name escapes me, to reenact the World Cup final. However, there were goals. Jane got the winner after tiptoeing past Gary, who was doing his Tony Adams impression, and giving rides on the beach. Another man doing impression was Chilts, who pretended to be Paul McGrath and disappeared. Now covered in sand, it was off to the pub for the pre-match meal and liquid refreshment. The fare was good, but however something was sadly missing, and as Nelson, Lord, not Mandela Gary, might have said, I see no chips. Next it was off to Newton Tracy, but not before calling in on Mr. and Mrs. Plunger at the brown-nosed named Abbey Fields. After secreting themselves for some 15 minutes behind the curtains, they must have breathed several sighs of relief as the minibus disappeared. Obviously racked with guilt, they sped off in their car in order to be at the ground to pretend they'd been there all the time. All the squad shook hands with Mr. Plunger, who was later to remark that he thought that young lad with the glasses That young lad with the glasses possessed a remarkably strong grip. After Sheepshagger Talbot had worried a few sheep, it was over to the pavilion and to prepare for the match. After setting the clock to 2:30 and the time-honoured tradition, play commenced. The captain for this match was Peacock Roberts. Did he win the toss? If he did, that was all we did win. Batting first, the Abbey amassed about 140 runs, the chair again scoring well and others not. In reply, Newton Tracy were in trouble early on until the arrival of Mike Gear. We'll let that one slide. This 16-year-old possessed a good eye and a nice tight bottom. Oh, sorry, where was I? Anyway, despite remarkably tight bowling by the spin twins, Robbo and Norsey, he soon reached a ton and the game was over. Time to concentrate on the night's drinking. After an Epsom salts, running, buffet, it was time for the Skittles challenge. Each had 3 attempts to knock down at least one Skittle or lose a life. Since most couldn't hit a cow's arse with a shovel, it was soon down to the few accurate ones. Robbo, Simo and Mr. Warner were fighting it out with the opposition skipper. It was easy to take an instant dislike to their skipper. Overlooking the fact that he was a good cricketer, he possessed a large lunchbox and attractive girlfriend, the bastard. Anyway, our lads prevailed, and we were given an excuse to quaff more ales and do many Long John Silver impressions, with Colin leading the way. Then it was off to the puffin for even more grog, and so to bed. Saturday morning arrived, and fewer still made breakfast. The party had to wait even longer for Simo to arise, before a decision could be made. General wandering around town seemed to be the order of the day for some, while Simo and his posse set off to retrieve Scoggy's jacket. There were reports of the Westward Ho Open Golf Championship on the putting green. It was a tense struggle by all accounts, and won by Robbo, with the aid of 2 holes in 1. The winner took everyone off to the 19th hole and treated the other competitors to an ice cream. Hockings, surprisingly. Then after all this excitement, it was back to the puffins to await the arrival of Messrs. King and Evans. Whilst awaiting the arrival of these cricketing giants, lunch and liquid refreshments were taken. The deadly duo had still not arrived at the end of lunch, so it was off to Holsworthy for the day's exciting fixture. A little local knowledge is often useful, and if only we'd had someone with any. Simo is a local lad, but it seems he didn't venture outside of Newton Tracy until he was 21, and even then not to where Holsworthy play. However, despite this setback, we eventually made it to the ground. The opposition looked as fit as us, so there was every reason to expect a win. Unfortunately, just as we were starting, our heroes arrived, and in the resulting confusion did not play. In the event, they took the opportunity to get out of their heads along with Robbo. The skipper for this game was Darren, and we were soon batting. The format for this match was an optimistic 40 overs a side. Would either side last 40 overs? I think not. Abbey posted a score of just over 100, with Long John Warner blasting 40-odd, which included several glorious shots. However, it was also Elvis's day. After knocking up on the boundary's edge like a schoolgirl, Elvis strode out to the wicket and proceeded to smash his first ball for 4. In reply, the opposition crumbled for about 60. What put the skids under them was the dismissal of their opening bat. Simo put one on a length as usual, and the batsman whacked the ball back over his head, as usual. Enter Elvis, who sprinted at least 100 yards to take a fine catch over his shoulder. He even found time for a Jerry Adams impression along the way. Abbey won again, and the game was completed well inside the laughable 80 overs. After the match, it was off to the local for burger, chips and beans, the vegans' favourite, with Colin and Norsey having several portions. After hearing that night's amusing finds, it was off to a pub around the corner to meet up with Messrs. King and Evans, who were by now totally smashed. Elvis impressed some girls with his inflated condom, but still didn't pull. The party later returned to Westward Ho, where embarrassingly Colin and Dave Kingdon were beaten at pool by an obese landlady and her daughter. Soon all were back at the puffin, where it seemed that the bar closed somewhat early again, and so to bed. A Sunday morning, and even fewer made brekkie. Seymour was very late up, and we were left to make our own decisions about what to do. Everyone was eventually rounded up, and it was off to Bideford, where there was an exciting carnival. As we arrived, a large helicopter was staging a rescue, but by now we'd had enough of big choppers. Following lunch, it was off to Newton Tracy again, and despite some hair-raising driving from Rumblestrip seamen, we were still late. Scoggy was the day's skipper, and with total disregard for the previous day, another 40 over match was agreed. As usual, we started at 2:30, but not after a heavy shower. After another blinding, or was it just blind performance, Abby got about 100. Three of our party, Messrs. Seaman, Chilton and Newby, played for the opposition, if only as well as they played for Abbey. In reply, Newton comfortably passed Abbey's score, with Chilts chipping in with 2 or 3 nervous runs. After we trudged off back to the pub which had been the scene of our infamous Skittles victory, many drinks were consumed as the party reflected on the many cricketing high spots of the tour. We departed the pub Long John Silver fashion, legless, and boarded the minibus. Chilts drove us home, and what a splendid job he did managing not to emulate Seymour's erratic driving. After several pit stops, one of which caused a tidal wave in North Devon, we were home in the familiar surroundings of Milton Keynes and district. All in all, your reporter believes it was a successful tour, well organised by Seymour. And here's to the next one. Cheerio. I'd like to thank L.B.Doubleyew, who can't be with us on this broadcast, for his report back in 1994, and wish him all the very best in his old age and dotage. This has been Cricket Tour Video Broadcasting News. Cheerio.